Hello all solo leveling fans. After we saw Suho successfully awaken his powers and return to Earth to help stop the zombie monster attack, we will now see the continuation of Suho's story after experiencing an incident where he was knocked unconscious by a zombie monster attack. In this chapter, Suho suddenly remembers his past while drawing. He wasn't just drawing an ant, but also Jinwoo's shadow soldiers. Suddenly, Suho wakes up, only to find it was just a dream. Suho is currently hospitalized after a previous battle. Suddenly, Suho receives a call from his uncle, who is very concerned about his condition. He says that the world is not well. Then, his uncle offers to escort Awakened. However, Suho declines, saying, "It's okay, none of that is necessary." Meanwhile, a television news report was released on the incident at Korea University of Arts. This incident caused a nationwide uproar, and it was announced that a new monster called Mistburn had been discovered, a monster that could infect hunters and even transform them into monsters. However, the Hunter Association delayed responding to the monster, even though the incident occurred in the middle of the city. This was because when the hunters arrived, a mystery remained. All the Mistburns at Korea University of Arts had died from an unknown cause. One of the students at the university claims that the people who had become monsters suddenly went berserk and exploded before his eyes. Suho, watching the news, smiled because he had finally awakened. He also realized that the incident was not a dream. Now, Suho is the only awakener who becomes stronger as he levels up. This time, we will show Suho's status. He is currently level 5, without a class or title. In fact, he only has one skill, Ruler's Authority, which is still at level 1. However, he is surprised because he should have been defeated by a C-rank Mistburn Awakener. He also wondered how he was still alive. Then, Suho was surprised when Baru, who was in the shadows, said it was all thanks to him. Baru then appeared and greeted him, as he hadn't seen him in a long time. Like picking up scattered pieces, old memories of him and Baru suddenly flooded Suho's mind. He knew that ant very well. Suho remembered that when he was little, Baru was one of the dark creatures who was by his side. But Suho wondered how he had forgotten about it until now. It turned out that Baru had come across dimensions to meet Suho. However, Suho still wondered why he had lived with dark creatures as a child. He was very curious because he had so many questions. Then, Suho said that in his memory, Baru wasn't that small. Baru replied that this was the effect of using a lot of mana while crossing dimensions. Baru also said that he was usually dashing and intimidating. However, Suho's system window indicated that Baru was a level 1 soldier. Baru immediately became furious with the system when a martial class soldier was treated as a level 1 soldier. Martial class is the highest soldier class in Sung Jinwoo's Shadow Army. Besides Baru, there were several other martial class soldiers. After Suho thanked Baru for saving him, Baru finally revealed his true purpose in coming to see Suho, to unseal Suho's seal. However, Suho had already unsealed his own. Suho then asked if the seal was related to the dream he had previously experienced. Baru replied that it was all something he had experienced before. Baru also said that Suho was much stronger than he is now. However, Baru explained that the great shadow monarch Sung Jinwoo sealed Suho's powers and memories, hoping that Suho would live a normal life. Suho was then shocked and said that Baru must have something to do with his father leaving home. Baru explained that Jinwoo didn't leave home, but went to outer space. Baru then explained that the great shadow monarch Sung Jinwoo went to outer space and is currently fighting against the invaders who are trying to take over the world. Suho's father is currently protecting the world against Itarim, the god of outer space. Baru said that Itarim sent their messenger, and while Baru was on his way to Suho, he also destroyed many enemies. Suho was also shocked to learn that the gates and monsters that appeared on Earth were also a result of the war. However, Suho still asked if his mother had gone with his father, as he knew she had disappeared on the same day as his father. Baru replied that his mother had gone with him. Suho then became angry because Itarim had prevented him from seeing his father and mother. Suho desperately wanted to see his parents because he had been lonely for a long time. Baru explained that there was only one way: to become strong. Baru took out a shadow key as a requirement for entry into the shadow dungeon that had appeared. The key stated that Suho was the son of the great Shadow King, but currently, Suho's innate talent had been completely sealed. To possess this great power, Suho must prove his worth by entering the Shadow Dungeon. After Suho inserted the key into his shadow, a gate suddenly appeared. The gate led to the Shadow Dungeon, where all of Suho's powers could be rediscovered. Then Baru remembered the king's order. Baru, go to Earth and unseal Suho. That was what the great shadow monarch Jinwoo had said. Suho's seal consisted of power and memories. When the seal was completely unsealed, Suho would be the one to protect Earth alone. Suho entered the gate. Once there, Baru explained that this place was a land of the dead where living beings were forbidden to set foot without the master's permission. Suho had entered the Shadow Dungeon. He had just arrived and thought it was more like a ruined city. However, for some reason, Suho felt a strong sense of familiarity. Suddenly, a quest appeared, stating that the Shadow Dungeon would never accept the weak Suho as its master. Suho was asked to survive for a specified period of time to prove his worth. In the quest, Suho had to survive for 4 hours, but Baru, his companion, warned him, "Beware, for the time of suffering will soon come." Suho suddenly attacked a monster, but he managed to counterattack. The monster was a goblin scout. Baru remarked, "If it was a goblin scout, there might be more around here." Suho immediately ran to attack it before the goblin could summon its friends. It turned out that Suho didn't attack it directly, but instead grabbed the goblin's weapon. He then attacked in one blow. The goblin fell instantly. Suho then explained that monsters stronger than him had colored names, while this goblin had no color, indicating it was weaker than Suho. Suho was suddenly startled when he heard the sound of a trumpet blown by one of the goblins that had just appeared. Naturally, Suho panicked because this trumpet was meant to summon a larger group of goblins, and indeed, a group of goblins immediately arrived. Suho asked Baru if he would help him, but Baru couldn't because he was far from the monarch and his mana hadn't yet replenished, so he had to conserve his strength. Furthermore, if Baru intervened, his HP would decrease. Finally, Suho had no choice but to try to defeat the goblin group. Meanwhile, Suho finally understood his skill, Ruler's Authority. This skill allowed Suho to physically influence objects without using his hands. Suho suddenly shot an arrow at Suho, but he caught it. Afterward, Suho realized there was an archer in the group of goblins. He prepared and immediately returned the arrow with Ruler's Authority. Baru remarked that this was an extraordinary skill adaptation. When Baru recalled the past, he described Suho's childhood as the birth of a legendary hero in a fairy tale. At that time, Suho could use the Ruler's Authority he inherited from the monarch at will. However, according to Baru, this power was created to destroy everything in a peaceful world. At that time, this power would only be a nuisance, but now the Apostle Iterum is attacking Earth, so Suho's current power is like a light to the world. When Suho realized that the Ruler's Authority could only weigh 10 kilograms, a goblin suddenly attacked from behind. In this condition, the goblin centurion began to move. Suho said that it hurt. While throwing the goblin weapon that stabbed him, he said that he felt more alive than when he had no power. Suho's attack immediately pierced several goblins in front of him and hit the goblin centurion. As Suho continued to fight, his HP gradually decreased, and a notification suddenly appeared that he had learned the resilience skill. He also experienced significant level gains. Suho ultimately managed to survive the goblins for 4 hours and was finished. For his success, Suho received a reward. The reward was a Shadow Extraction Runestone. A runestone is an item that contains a skill. If Suho uses the runestone, he will gain the Shadow Extraction skill. In the midst of the battle, Suho acquired the Resilience skill, which increased his physical defense by 20%. Suho then used a runestone and successfully acquired the Shadow Extraction skill. Shadow Extraction is a skill similar to the Monarch's, and it can extract mana from a lifeless body and transform it into a Shadow Soldier. Suho currently only has 3 Shadow Soldiers. Suho began to detect one of the goblin corpses there to test the skill. Initially, he was confused because he had to give a specific command for the skill. After some thought, he found the right word for the command. Arise. And that concludes Chapter 5. With ever-evolving powers and a great legacy running through his veins, Suho's journey in the Shadow Dungeon has just begun. Stay tuned for the exciting Ragnarok story in the next chapter.